When I decided to read these books and make this video, I had an outcome that I expected in mind, and it turns out my expectation was very far from reality. So I'm honestly a little bit scared to be making this video. Hi everyone, Rosie here. Welcome back to my channel, and happy Valentine's Day! No matter who or how you are spending today, I hope it's delightful, or, you know, if you hate Valentine's Day and think it's an over-commercialized mess, then that you get to hide under your rock and be glad that it's over soon. Maybe go pick up some of that discount chocolate tomorrow if it is safe to do so in your part of the world, because you deserve it. I, for one, am not huge on Valentine's Day, but I do fully believe in celebrating the major chocolate holidays, of which Valentine's Day is one, so of course I couldn't let the day go by unmarked. The idea for this video actually came to me months ago, and I've been saving it and sitting on it in my little pile of ideas, my little idea hoard, like a little booktube idea dragon, because I realized once I started my booktube channel and started watching other people's booktube channels that I really have never tried reading romance. I'll be perfectly honest, I always sort of figured I just wouldn't like them. But so many booktubers whose taste I otherwise align with really like romance. I've been exposed to so many books that sound so interesting, so I thought it's only fair to give it a proper go. I had a similar thought, you might recall, at Halloween with horror/thrillers, and I said, wait, I've never read one of these, I should probably try one. So I picked one that I already owned because I happened to have picked it up, I think without realizing it was a thriller, and that was kind of a flop. It ended up being a really boring book that I did not like at all, and it made me realize that now I need to go read others from that genre so I can figure out if it was that book a flop or is it not a genre I like. It really doesn't seem fair to read one book and then discount an entire genre. So of course, I came up with a plan. I decided I was going to read 3 different books by 3 different authors to get sort of a bit of a sample, try multiple things. That way I could see if I love 2 of them and one's a dud. Okay, well maybe I don't like that author, maybe I don't like that trope. But if I don't like any of them, that's probably a good sign that it's not a genre for me. However, even with trying 3 books, romance is a huge genre, and it has so many subgenres. So if I just tried 3 books, it feels like that would still be really unfair, because if I pick, you know, one contemporary, one historical, one fantasy? Yes, one fantasy romance. Well, I'm still really only getting one representative bite out of each genre, so how can I tell? Maybe I've just picked the wrong contemporary romance for me. Anyways, I decided to narrow down even further and try 3 historical romance novels. That choice was driven partially because they sound more interesting to me. I don't know why, they just do. And partially because, like I said, they're the ones that I really see talked about in the booktubers I follow, with a few exceptions, but I see so many people talking about them and so many people loving them. I'm into other history-based stuff. I love history nonfiction, I love historical fantasy. I know they're not the same, obviously, but it's like, well, I know I like a historical setting, so maybe I'll like historical romance. Let's give it a go. So I set out, I picked 3 books that I'm going to talk through sort of the blurb summary of each of the 3 books, and then I'm going to get into my experiences with them and finally talk about how I feel about the genre overall. How did this experiment go? Was it successful? Did I find a new genre that I love? Stay tuned to find out. The first book I picked was The Duchess Deal by Tessa. This is the first in the Girl Meets Duke series. In this book, Emma, a seamstress, shows up at the Duke of Ashbury's house wearing a horrible wedding dress that she sewed for his former fiancé. The wedding's been called off and his former fiancé refuses to pay her for her labor. So she shows up at his house, last-ditch attempt to get paid, sort of saying, I'm broke. Someone's gotta pay me for this. The dress doesn't stop to exist, the labor doesn't stop existing, just because you're not getting married anymore. On his side, Ashbury was horribly scarred in a war. I think the Napoleonic War? Basically a cannon backfired, he is disfigured on one side of his body, terrible scarring, and the reaction of his former fiancé and the rest of basically everybody has him living essentially as a hermit, because whenever he goes out and shows his face, people run screaming in the streets. He's so disfigured. But he's a duke, and he doesn't want his horrible cousin to inherit his title and lands and stuff, so he needs an heir. To get an heir, he needs a wife. When Emma shows up and he sees that she's not sort of fainting at the sight of him, he says, well look, here's a deal. I'm gonna make you a duchess, you're gonna give me a son. That's it. purely convenience, so of course we have a marriage of convenience and the story goes from there. I didn't pick this book on a particular recommendation from any one person. I just know that it's one that gets talked about a lot. I've seen a lot of booktubers mention it as one of their favorites. It's very, very highly reviewed on Goodreads. I thought, okay, this seems like a good place to start. That sounds interesting. I also decided to listen to this one on audiobook, and I'm going to read the other two as ebooks because I know that certain types of books I seem to vibe with better on audio. So I thought it's only fair to try both formats to make sure that I'm not missing something. The second book I chose to try is A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby by Vanessa Riley. This is the first in the Rogues and Remarkable Women series, which focuses on a group of widows. In this one, we follow Patience, who is a West Indian heiress and has been recently widowed after her husband commits suicide under mysterious circumstances very shortly after the birth of her child. Their child, obviously. So she has this newborn son, her husband has just died, she doesn't really have any friends or acquaintances or family in England, and her husband's evil uncle shows up, takes possession of her baby, and throws her in Bedlam. As I said, this series follows a group of widows. They are called the Widow's Grace, and through their help she is released from Bedlam, and when the evil uncle is ousted by the Duke of Reppington, the baby's rightful guardian, they help Patience get a job as her own son's nanny and wet nurse so that she can be with him and care for him even if she can't properly take back custody of her baby for, reasons. All Patience wants from this is a chance to find some hidden documents that will prove her validity as a guardian, regain her fortune, and she's going to take the baby and escape back to her home country. But the more time she spends working for and with the Duke and seeing how much he cares for her son, the more they both start to develop feelings for each other. One thing I wanted to do in preparing this list was to make sure that I wasn't reading, exclusively white cishet books by white cishet authors, so in this case, both the author and the heroine are women of color. I will admit, I found this book because I was looking for books with that sort of representation, and it sounded interesting. The third book I picked to try was The Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas, and this is the third in her Wallflower series. I started with number 3 because I remember seeing this one specifically recommended on Amrita's channel back last year at some point as one of her favorite romance books or something along those lines, and I figure where each book follows a different couple, I don't think I'm really missing out on too much by starting with number 3. Maybe I am, but I think on the whole it worked. This book follows Evangeline, who is set to inherit a fortune when her very sick father dies, but she is currently being basically held captive by her mother's family, who want her to marry her awful cousin so that they can keep control of her and, more importantly, her fortune. Desperate to escape, she turns to the Viscount St. Vincent, who in the previous book in the series kidnapped and tried to force her friend to marry him because he is so desperate for money. He's a notorious rake, but as I said, he really needs cash, so she turns up and says, hey, I'll marry you, I get protection, my family loses control over me, and you get access to my dowry, it fixes your financial problems, awesome. The one condition I have is that after our marriage night, I'm not sleeping with you. I'm not going to become another in the long list of people heartbroken by your rakish ways. Those are the 3 books I chose. Let's get into how I actually liked them. How did I get on with them? What were my thoughts? I'm going to go through them in the order of least to most enjoyed, and that means we're starting by talking about The Duchess Deal. I really didn't like this book. I'll be perfectly honest. I know it's a big favorite on booktube, I know it is very highly rated, but it did not work for me, unfortunately. I started listening to this one before I started reading either of the others, and at first I thought maybe I was just having trouble warming up to a new genre, getting into the style, getting into it type thing, and I was gonna like it more as the book went on. That was not the case, unfortunately, and the further in I got, the less I liked this book. Honestly, I probably would have DNF'd it if I hadn't been reading it / listening to it for this video, and I thought it would be unfair to finish halfway through and then assess. I thought, okay, I've got to finish to the end. Finish halfway through? I've got to read to the end so that I can give a fair assessment on the whole book, in case it's sort of, completely turned around in the second half. But I did that, and I can still say that it wasn't for me. I think my main issue with this book stems from the fact that I didn't particularly care for either of the characters, and at no point was I particularly invested in their story, which is a big issue, because in this book, the development of their relationship and them working through their problems as a couple is basically the whole plot. There's a minor side plot that pops up occasionally, but it really doesn't do much other than half motivate a couple decisions. It's not a major element, it's not something that they're actively working towards. So a whole book about a relationship where I don't feel like I connected to the relationship, you can see why that didn't work out too well. I found Emma, the seamstress, just sort of meh as a character. Basically, all I can sum up to you is she has a tragic backstory, she was a seamstress, she's sassy, and she's sexy. And that's all I got from her personality throughout the entire book. Maybe that's my reading of it, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's not like she had no characterization, I just didn't at any point feel connected to her. Unfortunately, I disliked Ashbury, the Duke, even more. As I said above, he's horribly scarred, everyone runs screaming from him. However, I found that the whole he's so disfigured that everyone thinks he's a demon part was maybe a bit oversold, because the author has to justify why he has shut himself away from the world, why he refuses to look in a mirror, why he refuses to go out in public, why he is such a miserable person now. You've got to justify that with something, and to do that, they literally have children screaming when they see him in the street type things. It just felt like a bit much, honestly. And other than that, his personality can basically be summed up by being a massive asshole to literally everyone in his life, which again, you can maybe excuse by the fact that people scream when they see him, so that's going to make a person a bit annoyed and testy. And when he does show his caring and, concerned and kind side, it's always in the most controlling, paternalistic way possible. So even when he did show that, I was never fully convinced that he was actually a character I liked. It's possible he's just not the type of hero I enjoy in these types of books, but throughout the whole book, and especially towards the end, I just didn't really understand why Emma liked him or loved him. So again, that's going to undermine my enjoyment of the book if I'm going, girl, what are you doing? Why are you with this guy? It feels like she's seeing things in him that I'm not as a reader, but then as a reader I'm going, how am I supposed to get invested in this relationship if I'm not seeing in him what you are? Now, the second aspect of this book that really hindered my enjoyment was because this is a marriage of convenience, they are married so that she can have a son, he has an heir. There was, of course, a lot of steamy scenes. Is that what we say? Is it steamy? Is it spicy? Am I allowed to say there's sex scenes? I'm not sure. Anyways, there's a lot of smutty scenes. I have a long and studied history with smutty fanfiction. However, I did not enjoy the way those scenes were written in this book. The combination of the language used, and I think especially listening to it on audiobook, meant that nothing was actually sounding steamy or spicy or anything like that. I just kept going, this is so cringe. Most of my notes from this book are just, this is so cringe, oh my god. With that part of the book, which is so central to the development of their relationship and the plot and so many scenes, not being enjoyable, again, it's hard to enjoy what's around it when those key components just aren't working for me. Finally, I just wasn't convinced by the ending of this one. It felt very much like we've seen them reach this point before, and I didn't feel like anything had happened to make this time any different, if that makes sense, because they'd reach a point of emotional connection and you'd think it's gonna be okay, and then of course something happens and it's not okay. And I guess I just didn't feel like I'd seen enough growth from either of them to really feel like this time it's going to be their happily ever after. It felt like that point could have come at multiple points in the story and been just the same. The sort of just slightly disappointing ending was the nail in the coffin for me, and as I said, this one wasn't to my tastes. Obviously, these are just my thoughts, my experiences. I'm not saying anything for or against the book in general, but it wasn't one that I enjoyed. Special note to Lana. I know in your January finds video you mentioned that you had just added this to your TBR, and despite everything I have just said, I think I'm going to recommend you keep it there, because so many people who read romance seem to really love this book. So to me, that says this is probably a not the book for me issue, not an issue with the book in general. I think go based on the opinion of people who actually consistently like this type of book, as opposed to someone who's just trying it out and saying they don't like it. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say there. I didn't want to discourage you. Next up, in terms of how much I enjoyed it, was The Devil in Winter. I liked this one a lot more than The Duchess Deal, but I still had some major issues with it that prevented me from fully enjoying it. Overall, I was way more invested in them as a couple and way more convinced that they were people who could work together once they got to know each other. When I was writing up my review, I couldn't really put my finger on why I liked the characters of Evangeline and the Viscount more than I liked Emma and the Duke, but there was something about them that I just liked more. The Viscount especially, I found, for the most part, a much more enjoyable male hero to read about, and Evangeline's incredibly shy, but like actually has strength and resolve, you just don't see it from the outside, type personality connected with me a lot more than Emma's, so already off to a good start in that sense. Another element I really appreciated about this book was that because we have Evangeline's terrible family, and legit, they are awful, and then some other things surrounding her father's death. They have some external conflict and external pressures in this story. The plot isn't just about them overcoming their issues and coming together as a couple. It's about them doing that while other things happen, and their relationship doesn't have to be the sole driver of the story. You can have external players do various things to help move the plot along, and I think for me, that really helped. That worked a lot better than the 100% relationship focusedness of the Duchess Deal. That being said, I had two main issues. The first was that the Viscount's character felt kind of changeable based on what the story needed. There's a scene in one chapter where he's literally telling Evangeline, his new wife, that basically, screw society, what do you want? You do your life, I don't care what people think. It's all good. And then a couple chapters later, he's trying to basically force her to go live somewhere she doesn't want to live because he thinks it's safest and it's for the best and it's what society will respect and she can't possibly... Anyway, there's whole reasons for it. But it just felt very much be a cool girl in the no, not Regency, this is Victorian. But be a Victorian cool girl, when in ways that are convenient to me, rebel against what society wants and do your thing, but then when it's not convenient for me, be conventional and don't actually be your own character or be your own person. I think if the author had shown the emotional motivation behind what he was trying to do, those could have worked. The plot points would have worked a lot better for me if we'd seen more emotional insight from him, as opposed to the surface level of what he was saying, because what he was saying made him sound like a terrible hypocrite, when if we'd understood a bit more of what was going on under the surface, you would have seen his own internal struggles that he was dealing with, and his choices and his actions would have made more sense. My second big issue was I felt that consent was just ignored. The writing of the steamy scenes I found better than the Duchess Deal. That might be partly because I was actually reading it as opposed to listening to it, but overall I did find it sexier, basically, than the first book I discussed. However, I can't remember a single sex scene in this book where both parties consented. I feel like every single one started with one of them either saying no or I don't want to or being asleep. Unfortunately, that starting point sort of ruined my enjoyment of what was to come. I get the feeling that the author was going for a sort of token protest type thing, and that it's all okay because once they start actually having sex, they both enjoy it and it's very good and he's considerate and all of these things. But when someone has said no at the beginning, I can't mentally get past that and then accept that it was actually a yes and that they're... Does this make sense? I hope it does. I hadn't realized how much that was going to bother me until I was reading this book, and I think it partly probably bothered me so much because I read it over the span of 2 days in my 24 and 48 hour readathon. I read all these scenes really close together and I really started to see the pattern and just get more and more annoyed every single time it happened. Despite those issues, I did enjoy seeing their relationship grow, and I did enjoy seeing how they both sort of came out of their shells and overcame challenges in their lives, and I really liked where this one ended up and the implied future for them. So it was a better book for me than the Duchess Deal. It just still wasn't perfect. And finally, of course, we come to A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby, which, as you can tell because it's at the end, was my favorite of the three, and I have to say I think it was my favorite of the three by far. Going in, I was actually worried that I was going to like this one a lot less than the other two because it sounded like it was going to have a lot more sort of serious real-world issues in it and be a lot less escapist than the first two. But from the first chapter of this, I was totally hooked, and way more than either of the others. I was really invested in the story the whole way through, and I wanted to keep reading the whole way through, and I was excited about it along the way. I really enjoyed this one, as you can probably tell. Patience and Repington were by far my favorite heroine and hero. Are those the terms? I think they are. Of the three couples, I felt like they both had the most interesting personalities, and I got to know them and was invested in each of their individual stories the most, which sort of weirdly, as a result, also made me way more invested in their combined relationship story because I cared more about each character. I don't think it's a coincidence that this one had by far the most non-relationship plot of the three books and was my favorite. This book has a lot more moving pieces, characters at work, and our two main characters both have strong, clear goals and motivations outside their relationship. This was somewhat the case in The Devil in Winter, but it's extremely the case here. They're both moving towards things for themselves as people that they want or desire or need, and that is really what's driving the story forward. Also, this book has a clear villain, and I think that was really great. Not only for offering challenges for them to overcome and throwing obstacles in their paths and things like that, but also because it means that neither of the characters, at least in my feeling, ever had to act out of character in order to drive the plot forward. The issues that drive the plot forward can come from an external source, not one of the characters suddenly doing something that you don't expect from them based on what you've seen so far. And for me, that made it a much more enjoyable read. I felt like both of the characters had consistent personalities that were internally consistent throughout the whole story. You never felt like Repington suddenly was being a different person because we need something to happen so that we can get to the next step. That next step comes externally. I think I've said that in like 5 different ways now, but I can't emphasize how much I liked that about this book. I also don't think it's a coincidence that this one is by far the slowest burn relationship. Of course, the other two both have marriage of convenience tropes, so they get married and are technically a couple from very early in the book and are then figuring out how to fall for each other and basically actually be a couple. In this one, it's far more, we gradually see them come to know each other and care for each other before they are at all romantically involved. Instead, we see them working together and gaining respect for each other, and when they do become romantically involved, it's because they both like each other and love each other, not for the convenience sake. And because it's such a slow burn romance, this one has very little in terms of sex scenes. I think there's one that's implied at the very end, but the most we get other than that is sort of some yearning and some tension, but we don't actually have it described, which for me worked really well. Again, I've liked certain fanfic that was of that type, but given that the writing in those scenes didn't fully work for me in the previous books, the absence of that meant I could enjoy their story and their relationship a lot more here. I think with this book, it's a classic case of because I liked it so much more, I have so much less to say. I just genuinely enjoyed this book and I thought it was really good. Okay, so some overall thoughts. I probably should have looked more into the tropes that were found in each of these books and tried to choose more different tropes to try. I accidentally ended up with 2 books that start with a marriage of convenience and 2 books that have a hero who has been left physically damaged and emotionally damaged by the Napoleonic Wars. It's very possible that I like historical romance in general, but I don't like marriage of convenience, and maybe that really biased my view on the first 2 books that I didn't enjoy so much. I also learned that I don't think I like romance on audiobooks. Having it narrated just didn't really work for me. Honestly, I did not enjoy the steamy scenes on audio, and in general, I just didn't want to keep listening to that one, whereas the other 2, even The Devil in Winter, which I didn't enjoy as much, I wanted to keep reading it. So I think if I do read more romance, it will be physical, not audio. Finally, I think maybe I have different taste with regards to the steamy scenes to possibly other people who read in this genre. And that's okay. But I saw so many reviews of both the Duchess Deal and The Devil in Winter that talked about how sexy it was, how much they enjoyed that, and I didn't really feel the same way. So I think there is an aspect of finding the authors who write things in the way that I enjoy them, and that would probably really change my perspective. So to get to the million-dollar question, will I be reading more historical romance novels? Unfortunately, the answer is a strong maybe. I definitely don't feel like I want to dive into the genre and pick up a whole bunch and read them right away. Given that the two of these that I didn't like so much appear to be really, really highly rated and fan favorites of the genre, that suggests to me that overall it's probably not a genre where I'm going to love a lot of the books. If I didn't get along well with these two favorites, probably I'm not gonna love the rest of the genre. I'll probably try some more in the future. I've actually got a couple others that I'm thinking about reading at some point and that I want to try. But I think in general, for me, historical romance is something that I'm going to be very selective about and only pick up if someone personally recommends it to me, as opposed to just recommending it in general as a great historical romance novel. I might pick up more Vanessa Riley, I guess, but I don't feel a huge need to. I enjoyed the book I read, but I feel like her novels would fill a very similar niche in my life to cozy mysteries. And frankly, there are just so many cozy mysteries that I love and that I want to read, so I'm not in a rush to pick up more of her works. Alright, what do you guys think? Was I horribly misguided? Did I pick the absolute wrong books to read? Is there a book that you love in the historical romance genre and you think that addresses all of the things I didn't like about these and that I should really read that one before I make a final decision? Let me know down below. Let's have a chat about it. I was really hoping that this would be a very positive and love-filled Valentine's Day video, and it's sort of not been, but hopefully it's been interesting anyways. As always, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.